Hey, everybody. Here's a quick word about our sponsors. First one being Laser App. You can find them at www.lasrapp.com. They're a laser activated shot reporter. They're amazing what it can do, all of the things that you can do with it, multiple guns, multiple locations, any type of target. They have a smorgasbord of items on their website store. Check them out. Use the affiliate link below or on our website, casualshooterpodcast.com, and use the code CSP 2021 for up to 15% off items not covered by the affiliate link. Next up, we have Gun Butter. I am one of those people that I clean my gun all the time because I feel like you've always got to clean the crud and put a fresh coat of lubrication on it. That's because of the stuff we had to use in the military. I didn't like it, but I have finally landed on something I can get behind, and that is gun butter. I did not shoot. I'm. I did not clean my gun at all at nationals. I did not clean it after the match before nationals, nor the match before that. And there's still gun butter oil on my gun. And I'm going to be using their grease on the lugs of my bolt gun. Next, we have Hoist. It is IV level hydration. It's clinically proven to absorb 110% faster than water. You've got all the right ingredients of your electrolytes that you need: magnesium, calcium, sodium, potassium. It's all in there. A little bit of sugar, but that mixes the right amount to make it absorb rapidly so it's not sitting in your belly and weighing you down. So check it out. Get hydrated, stay hydrated. And thanks for checking out our sponsors. It helps with the podcast. Mike Sharrett to the show. Hi, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dave.
Thanks for being on. How bad did I just murder your last name?
Sharrett, like Garrett.
Okay.
Yeah, you're
That
good.
works. Excellent. So, Mike, why don't you take a second and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Mike Sharrett. I live down in Lynchburg, Virginia, which is sort of the bottom of Area 8. Been shooting USPSA for, I think, 5 years now. PCC's kind of become my wheelhouse in the last two. I enjoy shooting open in the off season. Married, got two boys, 6-year-old and 4-year-old. Looking forward to getting them into the sport. Just love having fun at matches and making new friends. And here's a great opportunity to do that with you.
Yeah. So, you're a young guy. You got young kids. You're a young guy.
Well, 39, turning 40 in January, but I guess it's all relative.
My kids are 20 and 22. So, I'd like to say I was turning 40. All right. So, Mike, what we normally do is I will ask some icebreaker questions, typically the most difficult questions of your life. Are you
All
ready?
right. Yes.
What's your favorite movie?
I thought about it because I've watched a little bit of your podcast in advance of this, and I'm going to go with Boondock Saints.
Oh, I think you're the second one to say
Okay.
good movie.
Yeah.
What about book? Favorite book?
The Bible's the cliche answer, but I'd have to say it's Getting to Yes, which is by Fisher and Ury. It's a principled negotiation book. Goes through a lot of the classic negotiations, kind of in the 80s era, and just kind of gives you a framework on how to negotiate on principle rather than recognize when another person's digging into a position and you dig into a position. It really becomes a war that doesn't come out amiably for either side or efficient or effective. So that book was something I read before I got my first job interview in the finance industry. So I was prepared to negotiate for a salary. And I really found that helpful in all areas of life.
No Art of the Deal?
No. I'll be honest. Like, I'm glad I read that book because I might as well be illiterate. I don't read. I think it's an ADD thing that's never been diagnosed. But yeah, I don't read a lot of books.
I think you're in the majority there, so no shame.
Yeah.
All right. favorite superhero, or if you're not into that, historical figure.
Thought about that too, and I'd have to say it's Iron Man as embodied by Robert Downey Jr.
Okay.
He's mortal. He understands his mortality, but he still wants to help people. With the limitations that he has of technology and whatnot. And um, I identify with him a lot more than say a Superman or a Spider-Man or someone with supernatural powers.
Just well, I won't say a regular guy, a very, very rich regular guy, but
Right.
I'm with you. All right. So favorite gun and caliber, which don't have to be married together.
Sure. I mean, the right answer is my Da Vinci PCC because I'm on Team Da Vinci in 9 mm. But I think more universally, in terms of like the test of time, it would have to be an SBR in 223. So an AR-15 platform and 223 Remington.
Why SBR?
I shoot an SBR actually in PCC, which does make logistics a little difficult with 5320.20s to go out of state and whatnot. But I've just always liked the maneuverability of the platform, close quarter movement, or diving in and out of ports, for example, at a match. And it's something sexy about a short barrel rifle. The dimensions are all kind of square, and there's a level of exclusivity, right? Like not everyone can get one. Like you get a little bit of respect, when you show up with a suppressor on one, about the same length as a regular gun. So
But,
that's
but do women
that's
like
about
short
it, choose.
barrels? We
I'm
can
not
skip
gonna
that question.
I'm not gonna speculate on what the mass population feels about short barrels.
Okay, good. So I found some pictures on your Instagram here. And so question number 5 is going to be, I'm going to have to share the screen here in just a second.
Yeah.
Let me open this up. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So apocalyptic ghost death spiral hot sauce.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you're into hot sauce.
Yeah, make my own hot sauce.
Okay.
Love spicy food.
Okay. Now, how did you get into making your own hot sauce? How did that begin?
I mean, I guess the journey started on December 23rd, 2007, which was the day I met my wife and pursued her relentlessly into getting dinner with me that night. And in Lynchburg on a Sunday, TGI Fridays was the only place open. Of course, a lot's changed since then, but she whipped out one of those like little mini bottles of Tabasco and starts doctoring up her Jack Daniel's sauce. And I
No, she
wasn't
did
really into
not.
spicy. Yeah, and I was never into spicy food. My parents culturally rarely cooked with butter or salt, so like I was just learning of all the flavors of the world as an adult out on my own. And spicy food was just something I wasn't around. But I'm like, well, I can't let her out spice me at our first date. So I'm like, oh yeah, let me get some of that. And I doctor it up, and I'm like, whoo, this is good. And then from there, I learned that I enjoyed the endorphins popping on the top of your head with spicy food. And so, start working your way up the Buffalo Wild Wings menu, and then start trying, hotter levels of Thai and Indian food. And anyway, fast forward to the last 2 years, I've grown my own peppers in my garden out back, and I always make sure I have some, Carolina Reapers or ghost peppers, red chilies. I did Tabascos for the first time this year. And they produce more than I can really like eat and cook with, because my two boys can't handle spicy. They think a foreign flavor is spicy. I can't eat it. It's this spicy. It's like, no, it's just curry. It's just a different flavor. And my wife lost a lot of her spice tolerance during both of her pregnancies, just because she found that it passed through via the breast milk to our kids, and they had
Oh,
reactions and stuff. So she just she stopped eating super hot stuff, and so I'm kind of the solo man there. And so I've always enjoyed hot sauce, but it's kind of hard to find something that you want to go eat every day, or maybe you have something special to pair with. And so I looked up a recipe a year or so ago, and made my first batch, and I've kind of built off of that and learned what I like, what I don't like. And so I made 3 batches this year, and they turned out really great, and I've been giving those to friends. And family as gifts, and everyone says they're enjoying them. So that's fun. And
I
and
see.
the
Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say the name that you read, the Apocalyptic Ghost Death Spiral, is because it has apocalypse scorpion peppers, ghost peppers, and death spirals. And I think two of those are predominantly from Asian origin. And the way that particular bottle turned out, it's like, you ever have that the fermented chili paste that has like the rooster on it and the green lid, like you get it like
Mm-hmm.
Asian restaurants. It turned out very much with that flavor profile, but like 1,000 times hotter. So it's a great
Ooh.
kind of Asian pairing, hot sauce.
How much are you? I mean, I've never even heard of death spirals. I like hot sauce. Obviously, I've heard of the Ghost, the Carolina Reaper, all of that stuff. Not heard of Death Spiral before, so that's different. Um,
Hmm.
but how many drops of this are we talking? Like, if you're eating a bowl of chili, like how many drops of that stuff are you putting in?
And chili. I mean, I'd say, well, so all these sauces turned out kind of on the thick end, and so I took the little plastic thing off the top that you shake through, because you tend to only get like the vinegar and water parts. So I want more
Oh,
of the
okay,
actual food. I want more of the actual food to get in there too, both from a flavor standpoint
right.
and also the spice level. And so I'd say in a bowl of chili, I'd take that much of the neck and pour it in as a reference. So
Okay,
little
that's
a
still good.
cubic
That's a
cubic
good
centimeter.
bit.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
That'll light
My
your other
my
end up.
my tolerance is way up there, I think.
Yeah.
Well, there, just a best practice for everybody out there that likes spicy food or wants to step up their game: chewing thoroughly, which which hurts more up front, really helps not hurt on the backside. If you're picking up what to put down. Most
Uh,
people, eating
yeah.
chicken wings, oh, and they just try to get it down. Nah, you gotta enjoy the burn on this side so you don't have it on that side.
Boom. There you go. All right. Now we a tip from the expert. Now I've seen where let's see, what was it? I think it was the Made in Virginia store used to sell really like ghost pepper hot
Dave's
sauce.
Insanity.
Yeah, I mean there were a bunch of them, but there were a couple of them that had like this little itty bitty tiny spoon, literally, that you would just basically dip in and then put in your food. But it sounds to me like you're putting in a good bit of hot sauce in there.
Yeah.
Now it looks like you've made now I'm this other picture that I'm sharing looks like you've bottled it, and this is a habanero. This is what I was going to ask you before. So it's a habanero, Fresno, peach, and garlic, all four.
Yep.
Okay. Well, let me share this
Yeah.
other one. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I had about 40 habaneros. Oh yeah, there you go. So I like to, both for my reference and also just to share the love with other people, to kind of show the quantities of what I'm using. And yeah, there's a lot of red in there, and I peeled a peach and took the pit out and dropped it in to add a little bit of a sweet dimension to it. So I like to come up with flavors that complement each other, but still have a unique profile.
Okay. So yeah, it looks like you have habanero. I see the garlic. It looks like you have maybe even a red bell pepper in there.
Yeah, we had I guess it was called a gypsy pepper plant, which puts out kind of medium-sized bell peppers, like not the big square ones, but not the teeny bite-sized ones that you get in the store. And I didn't really know what else to do with those, so I was like, well, I'll throw that in there just for some extra content.
You're the second person I know of that makes hot sauce.
Oh, gosh, poppin' capsaicin on
Yeah.
Instagram. What? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know if you know Larry Talbot, but he's on
Yeah.
Team Da Vinci as well, and he and I like to compete together. He's I've been sending him my hot sauce every time I make, because he loves spicy food too, and he keeps telling me that he's got some hot sauce from, gosh, what's his name? Is it Jody?
Uh,
What?
no, but it is a J. I'm having,
Yeah,
you know what? I feel bad because I do know the
I know. I do. Well,
Brandon.
Brandon. Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
his
yeah.
name.
That's right.
Brandon.
So Brandon makes hot sauces, gives them to Larry. Larry's like, "You're gonna love this one," and then he always forgets to bring it to a match that we both go to. So I still haven't had any of his stuff, but I'm looking forward to it one day. We'll
I
do a
haven't
sauce
had
swap.
any. I haven't either. I've been meaning to pick some up whenever we're at Cavalier the same time. I just
Hmm.
Always forget to send them a message and say, "Hey, let me get some hot sauce." Plus, I haven't been to Cavalier in a while.
GRB puts on a fun match, it's for sure.
They do, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I like Chris and Tess. Yeah, I even shoot their IDPA matches. They're usually pretty good too. So I enjoy their matches they put on. I've even shot the match they hold down in Richmond at
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
the indoor. Yeah, they every Monday night they have an IDPA indoor match at Colonial Shooting Range there, right there on West Broad.
Nice.
Now, before we actually get into the shooting, your Instagram says you're a high speed driving school instructor. How'd you get into that?
Yeah, high performance driving school instructor.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
s- so, even if you haven't seen it, you're probably familiar with the show Top Gear, right? It's been around for many years. The British version came first, and there's been some American spin-offs. But on Top Gear, you've got all the new sports and supercars that come out, and they use their same racetrack that they have on their airstrip, and they have the Stig, which is their constant from a driver standpoint, and they benchmark all their cars on this supercar list, and which one's the fastest in the world. And just growing up as an automotive guy, or a fan of sports cars, um, I always knew I wanted to buy a BMW M3 when I was, working and could afford one. And so I ended up picking up an M3 back in 2009. It was used. It probably came off a lease in Arizona, right in the bottom of the financial crisis. February 25th of '09 was when I bought it. So March 6th was the bottom of that bear market. And so I got a great deal on it. I got it for under 20,000, shipped it out, and started driving it, and knew that I'd get in trouble if I just played around on the street with it, because I had an Acura, two-door Acura before that, and did a bunch of stupid stuff and got a bunch of tickets. So I knew I didn't want to go down that same route as my frontal cortex started to develop. I, I guess I turned 26 right before that. So anyway, yeah. So I had this M3, which is an iconic sports car in terms of German race cars, and I was like, man, I'd really, I know there's no way I can fly it over to Britain and get it on the Top Gear test track and see how I did in it versus their Stig. Not that it would be better in my favor. And so I started looking up ways to get on racetracks, and found the BMW Car Club of America, BMW CCA, which anybody can join, but I do recommend BMW owners join it. They've got a great monthly magazine, and they do events around the state, like drives to wineries or breweries on 151, or things like that, at least for our chapter. And then I found that they put on high performance driving schools, and I'm like, ooh, what's that? And so I learned about VIR, Virginia International Raceway, which
Mm-hmm.
VIR used to have USPSA matches up until about 2-3 years ago. They've got a shoot house with 4 rooms, so you're 180 is fluid. 180 is don't point it at the RO with a timer, you know.
Okay.
But it's super cool to roll through a house and tagging targets. And anyway, so I learned about VIR back in 2010, and so I signed up for my first high performance driving school. Bought a motorcycle helmet that was in spec. I did everything on the cheap, but I just want to get on track. And so I went down October 2010, and like most people, you're hooked once you're out there on a racetrack where there's no speed limits, and you got an instructor in the car with communicators in your ear. Go faster, brake. You missed the apex by 5 feet. What are you doing? Um, and so it was so much fun. And then, of course, while you're there, you learn there's a hierarchy in the sport, not unlike the classification system in USPSA. So when you first come there, you're a D level student, and they rate you on all these different metrics from a scale of 1 to 12. And when you move above threes in every category, well, now you get to be in the C class, and then B, B level student, and then A, and then above A, you can become an instructor. Or you can do the path that I did, which was I worked my way up to A, and or as an advanced student, and I took competition school to get my competition license so I could actually race in the club racing side of it. So you've got the high performance driving school funnel, and then you've got the club race funnel, which I guess would not be unlike taking a bunch of private lessons from a USPSA shooter, then finally starting to get to matches. And then now it's not just locals. Now you do a sectional. Now it's not just sectionals. Now you're at area 8, and then eventually you're at nationals, right? And competing well at that level, with peers of similar caliber. So I got into the club race side of it, and had a friend that would let me co-drive his car in endurance races because I didn't have my own race car, and you can't race a street car because you got to have a full cage and fire
Mm,
suppression and detachable seat belt and all the safety equipment that
wow.
wouldn't pass a road legal test, and a road legal car isn't safe to race. And so I had to drive other people's race cars, but thankfully I was able to demonstrate via uh, videos on Facebook or YouTube that I was safe and competent and relatively fast. And so I got to drive other people's cars, which was really cool. Then then outside of BMW CCA, a lot of BMW drivers also race in NASA, which is National Automotive Sports Association, and so they're just another club level, but they've got race cars, and pretty much any kind of car you could turn into will fit to a power to weight ratio class. So sort of an open division of racing. You just got to fit into these matrix, not unlike making power factor. And uh, and I learned there that they've got high performance driving schools uh, mixed in with their races. So you've got all the cool race cars doing their stuff. You've got students going out. You've got instructors. It's a real busy weekend. But I learned that instructors don't pay to be at these events. They get to go there for free because they're taking their time with two students, alternating, maybe every other 30 minutes, going out on track, putting their life on the line, trying to teach these students how to be faster, safer. And I'm like, ooh, instructors don't have to pay to be there. That's free track time. Like I can dig on that. And then I learned that you could work as a worker at these events because they just like staff at a match, right? You're going to shoot the match for free because you're putting in your time running the tablet or the timer or whatever it is. And so that's where I found kind of my niche in terms of getting more and more free track time. And they had run groups where you don't have to give a point by to pass. So on the BMW side of things, if I'm driving and you're behind me and you're just dogging me in all the corners, and you could pass me at will, right? Um, but I don't know you're there because maybe I'm a new student or I'm not as aware. Well, you can't pass me until I give you a point by over my roof or out my
Mm.
window to dictate which side. Hey, Dave, I see you. You're there. Pass me on the left side. You'll take the pass and you'll move on. I'll probably never see you again. And then, conversely, if I'm dogging on somebody, I'm like, oh, gosh, I could get by this guy, 50 different times, but he's got a big V8 and leaves me on the straights. But I catch him in the brake zone and dog him in the corners, and I got to wait for point by there too. So, well, NASA's advanced group and instructors group, you don't have to have point bys. So it's very much like racing light, which was far more appealing as a driver who tended to get caught behind other cars, particularly in the corners. And then some people there invited me to a group called Track Club USA, which is kind of the same as the SVT Club, Cobra Club with Mustang Group. And I demonstrated my ability to be a safe driver, but also my ability to distill complex information in a relatable way, which is really what my job is in the financial world. Um, and so they're like, "Yeah, man, why don't you come be an instructor? We need instructors to make these events happen and to grow." And so, using my experience at that point as a competition holding race car driver, my experience as an advanced run group student, and I'd even gotten to help out teach BMW CCA comp school for new students. So be an on track instructor to go out and do drills with them, observe them at speed, and so all that put together, I became an instructor and started instructing at those events to get my free track time. So I'd work this one group, instruct with this one group, and I'm proud of that. So that's why it's in my bio.
But BMWs is all you race?
Correct. Yeah, and
Okay.
it's been several years since I've been able to co-drive with somebody. Um, my risk tolerance for going 140 into a brake zone where you've got very small margins of, what if I hit some fluid, someone else drop down? What if I drop a wheel off track? And having two small kids at home thinking, man, you
Mm,
know, I,
yeah.
my risk tolerance started to drop. At the same time, I started to shoot USPSA. in my own personal vehicle, my M3, which sponsored by Redline Oil. I'd like to plug my other sponsor here, um, Da Vinci and Redline. Thank you guys for all your support. Um, when I'm out on track in my own car during the instructor run group, when I'm at one of these events where I'm instructing and I'm out there just having fun, I'm basically able to run within 1% of my best lap after lap after lap. And to push it past that just for the sake of having a lower lap time, playing golf against the course by yourself, well, that's great. I can shoot 77, 70, 70, 77. But man, to get that 76 or 75th might take hours in a sand trap or hours on the putting green. And you just kind of lose interest because you kind of hit a wall. And I didn't want to spend the money to fully convert it into a race car because it's still my daily driver. I drive it to all my matches. And the bigger expense of most race car ownership that people don't realize is you need a tow vehicle and a trailer. And and that in most cases can cost more, if not double, what building a race car could be. Certainly there are variants on that spectrum in terms of the equipment you use. But so yeah, my risk tolerance started to die down a little bit, and I might get back into instructing again because I do miss it. But for now, being an A class PCC shooter and a B class open shooter, I've got so much more room before I run out of competition. It's the great thing about
Right.
USPSA is it's a constant moving curve, and so that's really appealing to someone like me, and that's where I am right now.
Okay. Yeah, the competition in USPSA will constantly, it's very dynamic. It will
Yes,
constantly be changing. So,
I mean, besides classifiers, you're never going to shoot the same stage twice. Like that's really cool. When people ask me about, oh, well, what's a match like? How do you practice the stage you're about to shoot? Well, you don't, right? You can practice
right.
aspects of it. I mean, I can set up a drill where I come around a barrel and hit a stacker that has a no shoot in the middle and start making that tighter and tighter and tighter. And then when I'm at a match where the no shoot has, plenty of room in between it, well, it's that much faster in and out. But yeah, I mean, every stage is its own little snowflake in that sense, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, even when they didn't, they may have done it this year. I don't know. I was trying to see how much they changed the stages from carry optics to open and limited. And I saw
Hmm.
some similarities, but I mean, you can take a stage from one nationals, we'll say open and limited, just make a couple of changes, and now it becomes something almost completely different for production and PCC. So
Right.
you're
Yeah.
always just having
Yeah.
to practice those parts.
Well, and to Pat, a fellow competitor of mine who's also running for Area 6 director, Ben Barry, on his podcast recently, he was talking about how, like, wouldn't it be cool to take the best stages that you've seen at the best locals and make up your sectional of those stages, right? It's like, well, man, everybody loved that stage on Bay 5. That was so challenging. Everybody's talking about it. Wouldn't that be cool to see again in a sectional? And so we take, the best stage we've seen from GRB and the best stage we've seen from Fredericksburg and the best stage from Thurmont. And all of a sudden, Delmarva's made up of this best hits list. And then within the sectionals, wouldn't it be cool to take the best hit list of the sectionals, and that's what Area 8's made up of, and then to make nationals a best hit list of what you saw at all the different area matches, because no one's going to see all of those stages, and of course, like you said, a small tweak here or there, a no shoot, a swinger, changing where the activator is, but still, like the concept of the stage layout and how it's going to force you to attack it or treat it or tweak it, for PCC and open. You can put a 35-yard swinger out there. That's not reasonable for production,
Right.
not
Right.
not mixed with. So it's like, so anyway, just a little plug there for Ben. I enjoyed his podcast as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could even put a 35-yard swinger out there for open, I feel.
Oh yeah, I
But
I think so.
those are about the only two divisions I would do that to, though.
Right,
So
right.
that's reaching out there. So when did you shoot your first gun?
I was married. Um,
So
I'm trying
later
to
in
decide if
life.
yeah, yeah. I I was born in Charlottesville, but grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, fourth grade through high school. And out in Texas, everybody had a lease that they went hunted deer on, or they had a bunch of land, and pretty much everybody out there was hunters, to just kind of overgeneralize. Well, my dad was a pastor, and guns just he was never anti-gun. He was just like, I don't know, why do we need a gun? So I was like, all right, we don't have guns in the house, so I'm not around them. I had BB guns, which I guess could be technically the answer. In fact, I SBR'd a pump Daisy BB gun. I I, I cut the barrel to right past the pump, and the little plastic piece at the end just slides right on. And so I had this little like short barrel BB gun.
That's funny.
Maybe that's where it all goes. Maybe that's where it all goes back to. But
Yep.
but yeah, I actually, okay. My first time shooting a gun was an AK-47 after Thanksgiving night on a beach, which will remain anonymous. Um, it was my cousin Dave, God rest his soul, enlisted in the Army, 101st Airborne, and this was the last time I saw him. It was Thanksgiving in probably 05, if not 06. And he had an AK-47, and he was showing off, field stripping it with his eyes blindfolded and everything. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And it's late. Everybody's asleep, full of tryptophan from all the turkey. Super windy outside. So we pop over the dunes, and we all squeeze off 6 or 7 right into the surf. No dead dolphins the next day. But I think that was the first time I ever shot a gun, and it was loud because I didn't know about hearing protection with the big old 7.62 going off.
Yeah, those AKs are not quiet, not at all.
No, they're not. No.
And
so I think that was my first time.
Okay. Wow. On a Thanksgiving night, after all the football is over, we're going to go out and shoot AKs on the beach.
Yep.
Nice. So how did you from there find USPSA?
Yes. So from there, I'd gotten married. I think most USPSA shooters feel personal responsibility for their safety starts with yourself, and then perhaps will end up with law enforcement assisting. So, I wanted to protect my wife and I, as newlyweds, and I was researching gun articles, and I think the Ruger SR9C had just come out. And the thing that got me was it was the thinnest double stack mag on the market for the time, which I thought, well, if I'm going to get my concealed carry license, you want a thinner gun versus a thicker one. And I never was a fan of single stack personal defense weapons, just because I prefer capacity in case I need to get into a protruded gunfight where we're both over the couch. I don't know. So I ended up buying a Ruger SR9C. And my brother's 6 years younger than me. He already had bought a 1911. It was a Springfield GI spec. He let me shoot that. And he had built an SBR before I ever had an AR. And so I had my Ruger. I knew I wanted an AR after I shot one. And so so I remember, I want to say it was 2013, Obama's ATF had opened up comments for something to do with SBRs, and maybe it was just closing the e-forms window, but whatever, or no, maybe it was a change to the laws around ownership of guns with trusts. And so I basically hurried up and copied my brother's gun trust, did an e-file for a strip lower that I bought, and got my first SBR, somewhat like a year later back then. And so had my own SBR. Of course, I'm in the shooting community. There, in the car racing community, there's also a lot of people that like guns, maybe long range stuff. And so just the more I started to learn about it, the more I acquired a gun here or there, like a shotgun, and started doing some trap and skeet because that was cool. So I had my shotgun, my AR, and my pistol. And I learned about 3-gun. Now, I've never done a 3-gun match, but it was wicked appealing. So it's like, wow, this is so cool. Look at these guys. Look, watch Jerry Mitchell just go around and ding, 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 boom, 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 boom. And so I was aware competition was out there, but just like when I was aware that there were racetracks and I didn't know how to get on there, I didn't know how to get to competition. So I was at VIR working a NASA event with now a fellow USPSA shooter, Eric Wonger. So he and some of the other racers and I were hearing, you know, gunfire go off because I think Three Gun Nationals was being held at VIR that year. And so at a different event, or maybe it was the same event, we got to know the facilities manager at the time, and we're like, hey, what's all this gun stuff going on? Because you're obviously a facilities manager, And he's like, oh yeah, it's three gun. He's like, well, what's that? He's like, well, you bring a pistol, a shotgun, and a rifle, and you use one, two, or all three of them on the same stage. And we're like, that sounds awesome. So he let us, maybe on a Thursday or a Sunday, it was either before or after the match had happened. He put us on 3 or 4 different stages and ran the timer, and scored our hits and added the time for our misses. And so we all were out there. I mean, just imagine a D class shooter, but in all 3 disciplines out there doing 3 gun stages, and so yeah, so that's how we learned about that. Research then led us to USPSA. We're like, well, how do we get into USPSA? And we learned that, there's a classification system. Well, how do you get classified? We got to go to matches. And so the first USPSA match we did was at a range whose name shall not be mentioned, near Shadowhawk, and we did a steel challenge match because we're like, okay, you can get classified in steel challenge. And I think the round count was like 200. I brought maybe 250, and by the end of it was PayPaling people for an additional 250 because I didn't know what I was doing, man.
That's a lot of makeups.
Oh, dude. I mean, I remember the lady running the timer on my first Smoke and Hope run, which is like I mean, that's like the most hoser stage of all of them. I
Yes,
mean, that's like that. That's like, can you count classifier, right? And I think I'd put down like a 379. She's like, that was fast. I'm like, what's up? Of course, the rest of the stages were not as fast, and I'm out of mags. I'm like, what do I do now? Like, I still haven't finished this anyway. So that was we learned about steel challenge. We all uniformly agreed we didn't want to do steel challenge again. We then learn about the Machine Gun Nest, which is an indoor range up in Frederick, Maryland, very close to where Robert King, the owner of Red Hill Tactical, started making his holsters around that time. And so they held an indoor match every Thursday, including a classifier. So it was a 4-stage, including a classifier, and they just, they have 2 bays and kind of break down one and set up the other like you do with indoor stages. Try to leverage as much room as you can without moving stuff. And I make the trip up there and stay with my friend Eric, and then we drive up and shoot Machine Gun Nest. And I mean, gosh, that's where Keanu Asai got started. I'm trying to think of a lot, like who else is like maybe everyone would know on your podcast. There were a lot of good shooters that got started there in the Maryland area, and it was really neat to kind of be a part of that. Looking back at it, they were there every week, and in fact, the match director of the Machine Gun Nest was getting these letters or emails from USPSA. They're like, hey, it says you're the most active club in the country because you ran 48 classifiers last year. It's like, how did you do that? And they're like, no, seriously, it's just a weekly match. And so that unfortunately got shut down, I don't know, sometime in 2019 or 18, where they just felt the match wasn't profitable compared to having all their lanes open in the evening. So that went away. But by then I'd learned about other locals and other matches, and so I know that was AK on the beach to USPSA, but that's the path, and I guess that's why we're chatting.
That's a long drive from Roanoke all the way up to
Yeah,
Maryland like
I
that.
mean, well, and of course the kicker is if anyone knows about the 495 bridge across the Hudson, you want to get there before 3 or ideally before 2:30, because that's when all the accidents start happening and all the backup in the red on 66. So, I'd basically take the day off, and then half of Friday, because it'd take me 4 hours to get up to my friend's house. We'd hang out in the afternoon, maybe load ammo. That's where I learned how to load ammo. A lot of funny stories at my expense there. And then we drive up to the match, and then we'd all go out to dinner somewhere afterwards, and I'd stay the night and leave the next morning. So yeah, it was a long drive, but it was a lot of fun to get to know a lot of those people. And I didn't have a local shooting community yet, so I didn't have anybody to go to matches for. So as far as I knew, that was the match. I mean, like I knew there were other matches, but I was not comfortable at my D and C production level skill level, like everybody starts out in production, until you learn, oh, there's limited minor. That's so much more fun than all these mag changes. you know um
Right.
so during that season of driving up and back, we learned about two gun, and I did do two gun matches at the range that shall not be named, close to Shadowhawk. And that was a ton of fun, and that actually got me into a long range two gun match at VIR one year, because VIR has 1,000-yard range and a bunch of different shooting lanes that go out to like 6, 7, and 800 yards. And so they put together, I think it was a Noveski sponsored two gun match, where you'd basically hose a bunch of steel with your pistol, bucket it, get on the rifle, and do your long range thing. And so I guess I was comfortable enough with competition by then to go by myself and not know anybody in my squad. That was really the first time I stepped out and did something like that. And yeah, I lost my train of thought where we were, but that's a little side story. Doing a little two gun too.
So you shot a PRS match, huh?
One PRS match, yes.
Okay. How did you like it?
I loved it, and I'm gonna love it even more now that I understand what the par time is for.
Okay.
So my experience with par time was two gun, where in a big old bay with, I don't know, maybe 25 steel targets you got to knock down, and then some paper targets and whatever. Like, maybe you have 60 or 90 seconds to be doing both disciplines, right? And excuse me, and if you don't engage the targets, you get failure to engage penalties, additional time added, and of course, any target that gets left up is more time added. And so I didn't understand that a 90-second 8-target stage for PRS, it's far better to hit 4 of those targets and time out than to engage all 8 in 65 seconds, like a good USPSA shooter would, right? Go fast, go fast,
right.
engage, right?
Yeah.
It's okay, Charlie's deltas, whatever. And so I didn't hit anything on a lot of stages because I went too fast, and I also didn't know how to really trust my dope. I didn't understand that when my Kestrel tells me to have 1.5 to the right, it's because the literal barrel twist is pushing the bullet a little bit over, or left, or whatever it is. And so once I got kind of halfway through the match, and I'm like, wow, this dope is right on. And even my holdover, with the reticle is dead on, because some stages have gimmicks like, you can dial for the stage, but once you're on the stage, you can't dial, right? So like I remember specifically, there's a 700-yard 12-inch square and a 480-yard 12-inch circle. And so by this point, I'm realizing, okay, I'm going too fast to shoot well. I need to take my hits where I can. So I dialed for the 400 and figured out what my holdover would be for the 700. And I actually hit the 700 once with, like, from your perspective, it was like I'm like holding right here, like way up, and then hit three of the 4 on the close one. And so
like what,
anyway,
1:30, 2 o'clock ish, 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock ish.
Yeah, 2 o'clock. Yeah, right.
Okay.
I'd say right on the 2 o'clock. Exactly. I mean, but it was like 7 up and 4 over, and I'm like, I hope, and so I learned a lot, and I hope a new PRS shooter can learn from my mistakes. It's far better to be taken 3, 4, and 5 on the shots that you're most confident with and time out, then engage everything. Because I engaged everything, just not well.
Right. Well, and
So
being someone who started in rifle, I would have put my dope for 700 because
absolutely.
I'd much rather put my reticle there. It's easier to hold off on a closer target than it is a much farther.
Yep. And I knew that too in principle. But at this point
Okay.
I'm thinking, I've got to game the system as best I can, for where I am, because I'm starting
Yeah.
to count my hits. And I only had 2 stages where I hit 4, and I had many where I hit 0. And so, my gun is fully capable of hitting all those targets. I mean, it's a 20-inch Wilson combat barrel, super sniper profile. I mean, it's a nice heavy barrel. I run a Yankee Hill titanium Phantom suppressor on it, and a nice budget first focal plane Vortex optic, and 77 grain OTM ammo from Stand One Armory, and I hit the 1,000-yard target on the clock. There was a cool stage where you had like a 480, a 900, 1,000, and then an 1135, and so I had all my dope, written down next to me, and you can't engage the next target until you shoot the first one. So pop,
Okay.
bing, impact. Okay, zzz, zzz, pop, pop, impact. Zzz, zzz, pop, pop, bing. Yeah, 1,000-yard. Oh, 1,000-yard club. Impact. And I go to dial for the 1135, and I ran out of elevation. And
Yeah.
so now I'm having to do math on the fly. Okay, I only had 44 up. I need like 48 or whatever it was, and now I'm like, I knew I also had to dial for wind, and so now I'm doing my Kentucky windage again, and man, it was splashing all around it, but I never hit that 1135. But it was such a great experience, because just like every shooting event I've ever been to, there's just great people everywhere, and everybody's willing to help, and everybody's offering you tips. And the ROs were very generous for me, since I was shooting a gas gun. You're technically supposed to flip on the safety in between moving, even just 1 foot over to a different position,
Right.
whereas a bolt gun, you just leave the bolt open, and then boom, you're down and you're back
Right.
on it. And so, you know, PCC shooter, I'm just finger off the trigger. I'm not flipping my safety on and off. That's not a discipline that I practice. And so while I try to do that, they were just like, dude, you move the whole time without the safety on. I'm like, I'm sorry, don't DQ me. I'm like, and they've got the 120. It's not the 180. But
Right.
but but the 120 doesn't apply to muzzle in the air. it's
Correct.
it's just it's like okay, this is similar enough, but it's different enough where there was a learning curve. And certainly just trusting the dope was my biggest walk away. I ended up hitting 16 out of 80 targets. I think that was the target count, which wasn't last, which was ultimately my goal. And of course, have fun. And I had a blast. But there's a lot that I will be going back to 1 or 2 of those this year. In fact, my buddy Keyshawn, who's in that picture with me, he's the one that got me into it. He's a part of a Thursday night group that we get together with a bunch of guys, just kind of hang out, BYOB, fire pit, that kind of thing. Just solve the world's problems. Kind of a little friend group that I've been a part of for about 11 years now. And so he got me into PRS, and of course, he knows a lot of people that do PRS and maybe 2 or 3 gun and do USPSA, but he's never shot a USPSA match. So we finally got his shooting schedule for his off season and my off season all lined up. We're going to go down to Sir Walter the first Saturday in November, and he's going to shoot his first match with his everyday carry, which is a Glock with a Timney trigger. And so I told him, hey, I'll do my everyday carry as well, which is a CZ P10 full size. And so we're both going to run limited minor just to kind of get him into the sport and, wet his whistle. I really want to shoot open, but once we get into the bullet test, we'll talk about why I'm not going to shoot open for this particular match. But, just to keep things on a level playing field with him so we can follow my stage plan, mag change here, whatever there, go for the alphas. We're going to get a training session in sometime in between now and then, just to kind of, talk them through some of the basics that you'd want to know going to your first match that I didn't necessarily. So that's my PRS story and the parlay and the pulling him over to the USPSA side.
All right. So 2 important questions before we move on. Is your scope in minutes or mils?
It's MOA, which
Okay.
is the opposite of what everybody uses.
except me.
Ev-
I use MOA.
You do? Okay.
Oh,
Everybody there was using
absolutely.
Mills.
I know.
Yeah.
That's all right. They're not
Well, and I
American. It's all good.
it, and you know, that's another thing I didn't know any better is like I've only heard MOA in any sort of rifle discussion until you get into the PRS circle. And
Right.
maybe there have been mill out there, but like it just that just isn't prevalent, at least in my building up to it in any sort of gun community. So yeah, shoot MOA.
Okay. I like it. I actually use a second focal plane scope because I prefer that.
Hmm.
And eighth of an MOA adjustment.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, so they're finer adjustments than mill.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, MOA is a finer adjustment than mill by its very definition, particularly
Yes.
on a click to click basis. But
Correct.
yeah, it's interesting. I think as a first time shooter, a second focal plane would have been a better tool for me to have because hey, I've got 25 zoom. Well, yeah, I'm going to use that. Well, I'd lose targets going back and forth between stuff. And
Just yep.
when Keyshawn was telling me, he's like, dude, trust me, don't go past 15 on the zoom. I'm like, but I need the zoom, right? Like I don't want my little dot in the middle to be basically covering the target. I want to, here's me thinking I'm going to spot my own trace and I'm going to watch where my bullet hits, and because I'm so zoomed in, I'm just going to make that adjustment or move the gun a little bit. So yeah, I towards the end, 15 was it. I mean, until we got to the 1,000, I'm like, yeah, I need to actually find the target. I need that 25, but yeah, that wasn't as much of a moving back and forth, several hundred yards in terms of finding the different arrays to engage.
How bad was the Mirage at 1,000?
Uh, this range starts with the sun in your face, which created it's Pig River Valley, which is down past Smith Mountain Lake. What's the city down there? Well, anyway, Pig River puts on a really great high quality match. All their barriers and barricades are permanent and very dynamic. But there's a valley a few hundred yards out that you're shooting over, and as the sun is heating that up, there was actually updraft that was pushing my bullets 20 feet over a target, shoot 223, and I was like, guys, I'm on it. I'm on the dope. They're like, we don't see anything. We don't see anything. I finally figure out I'm probably putting them over the target, and so I drop it down and start hitting at the post of one, and then we can kind of dial it in from there. But yeah, the 1,000 wasn't bad because at that point the sun was either above or behind me, and it wasn't that bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
But sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Modern Day Sniper?
I've heard of it.
It's two guys. It's Philip Vallejo, and I'm trying to remember the other gentleman's name. Kalen Wojcik. If you ever get a chance,
not familiar.
they run classes there. They were there
Mm-hmm.
last November. I was going to try to run down there and meet up with those guys because we're all former Marine snipers.
Oh, right on.
They might be. If you ever get a chance to take a class with them down there, I highly suggest
Yeah.
it.
Well, I know Keyshawn's taken a class with a really high level competitor, and that really helped his game. And what I need to do is find a friend up near Quantico. Well, I've got plenty of friends up there. I just need to ask somebody because I want to do Tim's PRS match that he puts on after his gas gun match. Yeah. So he's every time yeah. So that's on my list sometime next year is to make that a stop. But for now it's usually first Saturday of the month down North Carolina at Sir Walter, and they put on the best level one that I've ever been to. It's 8 stages, just so dynamic. It's a really great prep for majors, and worth the drive for someone that needs that kind of challenge. And then third Saturday I try to make GRB, and then North Carolina State, Virginia State, Maryland State, Delmarva, Area 8, Area 6, and finally got to shoot the Carolina Reaper this year, which is Chris Tilley's match. He's scheduled it the last 3 years and had to cancel because there's 30 people signed up, and I guess he can't get help. But this year he was able to put it on. Unfortunately, we shot on Friday, which was tornado what is it? It's either watch or warning, and you do the taco thing, right? Like warning, I might eat a taco, or you're watching me eat a taco. I forget that. Anyway, whatever it was like tornadoes were in the area. We were getting drenched. We were a 5-person squad that should have been done by noon, and we still finished at like 3:30 or 4 because we were just huddled under tents most of the day watching, you know, water wash by our feet. But the match itself was incredible. Like if I could shoot that on a dry day, I'm definitely gonna shoot that next year. But I know you didn't ask me about my match schedule, but I just gave it to you.
It's okay. It sounds like the Caribbean Open.
Yeah, I know. Gosh, I still remember that slow motion video of JJ's foot sweeping into position in water, spraying off to the side.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right. So I had some other stuff, but we've been chatting for a while, so we need to get into this testing stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
all right. So you've done a couple of different tests.
Mhm.
You did your first one was, I believe, a 160 grain test, correct?
Correct.
There
There,
it
that
is.
that red and blue.
All
Yeah,
right, I'll redo these were both 160 grains, correct?
correct.
Okay. And it looks like you did a chrono and an accuracy, or we're
I
going
ditched the.
to.
I was going to. I learned a lot from this test.
Okay.
I learned how many people like to be keyboard commandos.
Ooh,
um,
yeah.
but that's fine. I've got a thick skin. I also learned that I don't know. There is no perfect ammo test. And as soon as you say, well, this is how I would have everything set, I'd be able to give you an example about how it changes another dynamic. And so there is no perfect ammo test. And everybody that reaching out online, pooping on my test or saying that I'm pooping on a bullet manufacturer when I'm not, like they're not writing Field and Stream being like, hey, why'd you test Spear 124 plus P jacket hollow point and then a 147 from Winchester and a 90 grain from Barnes? Like a self-defense ammo test is intrinsically everything is different. Everything is different. And so, with an ammo test, there's going to be differences. The biggest thing that I learned is, and I might do the 160 again. It's unfortunate I loaded all of the 160 that I had. Um, what was interesting was the case gauge failure rate was astronomical with the blues. I think it's because its overall length for how I have my dies set, it was squishing the nose, and you can see a profile change picture in a different post. And I think that was, because I run the Lee undersized die. Ever since I watched David Wampler do a little FYI video on set and dies and things like that, particularly for 9 major when you've got a really full case of powder. He was talking about the Lee undersized die, which kind of makes a little bit of a bow tie effect in the middle of the case, and it keeps the bullet from having
Hmm.
setback to becoming a compressed load, or I mean, 9 majors already way out of Sammy spec, but to making it a dangerous round. And so I run an undersized die for that reason. And I think, unless, I mean, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give blues the benefit of the doubt that it's not a bad bullet, that's not a bad material, that's not a bad profile, and that perhaps it was my dies. But the case gauge failure rate was astronomical. The fact that the majority of them case gauged was fine, but I found it very odd that none of my reds failed case gauge, and maybe 24 blues did. And so like that was just a really high failure rate. So I had the same powder charge, the same mixed brass, same primer, same gun. And when the chrono was so much lower, I had to ask myself, is it the coating that's that much different? Is it the shape of the bullet after it got deformed a little bit? And so I didn't do the accuracy test because the feet per second difference was so wide, particularly on the lower side. I felt that that would be doing a disservice to the bullet manufacturer throwing stuff out that are however many feet per second slower, which in 160 grain terms, I push my red bullets from Summit City anywhere from like 790 to 810 feet per second. Like, it's not moving very fast. In fact, when we look at some of the 124 grain 9 major, well, actually, I didn't accuracy the 9 major. I did it with 5.1 grain for my PCC's sake. But even with the 124s going, 1,300 feet per second, they were several inches off the bullseye to the right from where my 160s would hit. And one of the pictures actually shows a good example of that. But yeah, so I did the first test. I was really excited to get my hands on the blues. The Blue Bullets sponsors the Carolina Classic every year. They put on a great match. They're a great company. I've used their 200 grain and 165 in my 40. I used their 147s and 125 profile, like the 125s in open. And so when they came out with 160s, I didn't want to commit to a whole flat rate box of it, particularly if something like this happened with my testing. And so they were very generous at the Carolina Classic. It's like, man, take a couple handfuls, test them out. And so, how do I take my usual red bullet load and compare it to a die adjustment, if that's what needed to happen with the blues, and have a completely different overall length and different inside pressures? And so, was it a great test? I mean, probably not. Am I glad I did it? Yeah, I learned a lot. Would I add parameters like I did for the 124? Yeah. But yeah, I did the test. The only fair thing to say is that the blues didn't case gauge very well. And what's the product of that? We can speculate on bad brass in the mixed batch, or the dies need to be adjusted. So
Oh,
I don't know.
all right. So I have a question. Did they
Yeah.
just not case gauge because the overall length? Like, did you have the case gauge sitting flat on a table and the nose of the
I,
round hit the table so it
no,
wouldn't go? No?
no. So I've got a 3D printed tray that bumps my hundo gauge, up where
Okay.
you never have a bullet hit the ground. So
Okay.
it was case deformation. And something that I always
Oh,
do. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the case, coming into the case, it would bulge to the side, and it
wow.
certainly wasn't running into powder, because 2.5 grains of powder looks like there's hardly any powder in there.
Right.
That's why I like to visually inspect every single case as it goes by before I put my bullet in. So it wasn't running into powder. Um, my guess is it was running into the undersized crimp. And so, could this have been solved without adjusting my height and adjusting where my undersize crimp is? Yeah, I guess so. But I've got that set for the 160 profile, and all my 124s work with that profile too. So, it wasn't running into the bottom. I always run any ammo that doesn't case gauge back through my set and crimp die, because every once in a while, particularly with mixed brass, you'll get like a military crimped primer, and instead of punching it out, it'll can open it, and it'll stick in the plate as it rotates in between positions, and it'll stick, and like almost the resistance of the press will finally rip it off. But that may throw 2 cases full of powder into the next position and shake some powder out. And at 2.5 grains, I can't afford to lose any powder and not make power factor, because I had that happen on 2 of my whole batch. And now I'm DQ, or now I'm shooting for fun. Well, still shooting for fun, but not getting scored. So
Right.
anyway, anytime I have something that screeches my press to a halt, I always take all the bullets out and just kind of start over, because I have loaded a squib before, and I'm positive it happened because something happened with the press. It stopped. I never got the full powder charge, or didn't get the powder charge, and I end up loading a bullet and sending it through, and it case gauges, because of course it does. So I take any round that isn't case gauged, and I just assume it got seated, partially crimped, or maybe not. And in a lot of cases, running it back through the dies resolves the problem, because usually it's a half-made bullet, or not a completely made bullet. So I did that with all the blues as well. Ran them back through all the gauges, still didn't case gauge. So I think it was either running into the crimp of the case from the undersized die and then tilting a little bit. But
Okay.
I don't understand But I don't understand why all the other ones didn't do that too. So all the bullets lost their pointy profile and came down a little bit, and then most case
Mm.
gauged, but some didn't. And so, we could probably spend the rest of our time on the podcast speculating about why it didn't. The fact is it didn't. And I wish I'd saved some blues so I could play around with something different. And I'll just probably end up biting the bullet proverbially and buying some and giving them a second shot, because I really enjoy blues. And they ship fast and they're great customer service, but this test just didn't turn out the way I thought it would. I was really hoping for an apples to apples in almost every way. And, then it comes down to accuracy. It comes down to the coating, versus the high tech. I don't know. It didn't.
Now, have you reached out to Blue Bullets to see if they have an answer? And the reason I'm asking is I
Yeah.
had a problem with my rival. Let me grab it.
Okay.
Now, so this is what I shoot.
Right.
So no mag, chambers empty, nothing in there. But when I first, so this is my second one. The first one I got went back to Canic, and I was shooting it. All the ammo case gauged perfectly fine. Always like you, I case gauge everything. Everything was perfect, great. I go to a range. I was having some issues where I didn't know if I was having light primer strikes or what, but they looked fine. But there was no detonation, and I kept running into the problem. Finally, I'm on this one stage. It's a classifier, and Todd Jarrett is the RO. This is at Fredericksburg.
Mm-hmm.
And the very last shot on the classifier, when it goes bang, I feel stuff on my hand, on the bottom, on the top.
At a battery discharge.
I had an out of battery discharge. And thank God Todd was running the stage, because he's like, do you know what just happened? I was like, no, I don't actually.
Yeah.
And he goes, you had an out of battery discharge. And I'm like, okay. So I called Canic. They were like, send us your gun. We'll take a look at it. I sent them the gun. Well, actually, I did a couple of tests first. So what I found was, even though it passed the case gauge, it would not pass the plunk test.
Yeah.
And I was like, what in the world? So I have multiple Canics and an aftermarket barrel for one of my SFX, the original 5.2 barrel. And so I did a plunk test with all of them, with like 4 or 5 different barrels, and they worked in all of them but the new barrel. And I was like, what in the world is going on? So then I'm like, okay, now I got to figure out what in the world is going on. And ended up calling the owner of Brass Monkey Bullets, and we chatted for a while, probably a good half hour, 40 minutes. And it's all about he was saying how the coating on those bullets are thicker than normal copper jacketed bullets. So they're fatter. And if the shape of that ogive isn't right and it's fatter, then you're going to get it where it's going to hit the lands and grooves and either go in or not. And on that one, so that's what I found out was going on. It wasn't quite going in far enough to where the firing pin could get a good solid hit on the primer. So that's why I'm asking, have you reached out to Blue Bullets to see?
No, and I should. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, speaking of out of battery discharges, most of the time when it doesn't case gauge, but it's like just barely, like if I've got just a little bit of brass sticking up, I attribute that to a slightly longer brass manufacturer. And in all my PCCs in the past, I'll chamber it and I'll see if it's running into rifling, or if it chambers, I might do a one-off, just pop it at the range, because what else is it good for? I'm not going to run it a match, doesn't case gauge, but just barely out of spec. Well, I did that with a blue, and I had the same thing. All of a sudden, puff of smoke, mag shoots out the bottom.
Oh,
I feel like I got punched. Feel like I got punched in the lip, because Da Vinci's have a side charging handle, so basically the upper is open on both sides. So it's and I was like, okay, don't chamber out of spec ammo, because the Da Vinci chamber can take the pressure of 9 major, but no chamber should take an out of spec round that isn't getting all the way in the chamber. So I learned a lesson,
Right.
thankfully safe, still safe and sound, but learned a lesson there for sure.
Oh, okay.
You
Yeah,
see
you
the
can
difference
see
there?
on the first picture, the tip of the blue is definitely longer than the red, and then there it's been flattened and it actually looks shorter.
Yeah,
That's the Summit City bullet.
correct. The red
Okay,
Summit
yeah,
City, yeah.
right. So yeah, it's shorter. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean,
Interesting.
this is a phenomenon I've never experienced. I've loaded different 200 grain bullet profiles back to back to back to back to back, and 124s, 147s, and so I mean, the word assumption obviously always makes the person using it look stupid, but I just assumed 160s would just load back to back to back too. But clearly there was some changes going on, and it's happening in the press, right? So I'll definitely reach out to Blue and say, hey, here's what happened. Any recommendations without having to redo all my settings? Because right now, 124 open major and 160 PCC all work exactly how my dies were set up, and I'd frankly prefer to keep it that way. So
Right. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I ended up finding out that I've got to load mine extremely short. So like 108 to 111.
yeah. I mean, I'm
So
1.1 and under on everything.
okay. All right. So now recently you did a 9 millimeter major test. So let me
Hmm.
actually I can. So before we start pulling up oh wait here. We'll start there. So what were you testing?
That's this one, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah. Okay.
adjust it too. So
Yeah. So what was I testing? So uh, I in the off season, since I like to shoot open, I got all my PCC powder out, got my open powder out, and started prepping to shoot open in some practice, and go maybe shoot at Sir Walter, etc. And I've got all these 125 grain blue bullets, which have always worked great. Also during the pandemic, when ammo components started getting harder to get, I was getting Discord push notifications. Like I've got one on my phone right now. I didn't look at what it was, but I set it up where I get notifications on in stock rifle and pistol powder, in stock, small rifle and small pistol primers, small magnum, and then projectiles. Because I didn't have a ton of projectiles, but I knew I didn't want to run out of them. And in sort of the scarcity mindset slash wanting to be prepared mindset, I'd scoop up a powder even if I didn't understand what its use was for, knowing I'd probably be able to liquidate it later at a match to somebody, or grab some primers. And so I started doing the same thing with bullets, because particularly back then, bullet lead time was months out. I don't know if you
mm-hmm.
remember, but
Yeah,
Blues might be like, hey, it might be 11 weeks. And like,
right.
I get it. They're running a business and they're getting components and they've got their side of supply chain and all that. But I didn't want to run out of bullets. So I started getting into different manufacturers. And that's when I learned about Summit City and Bayou bullets. And so I grabbed, Bayous for my limited gun, and grabbed Summit City for PCC. And then I learned, I'm like, whoa, there's a 160? Because I've always preferred heavier bullets over snappy. And I may progress into a snappy bullet, but like a slow 200 grain. I mean, I can't really improve my splits much more just based on recoil impulse, and I like how the gun has perceived less recoil than when I use a 165 or a 180. And so I was like, well, let me try that with PCC too. And I really liked the slower bullet with less dot movement, because it let me focus more on what I need to be doing with the rest of my body, not what I'm feeling on the gun. And I think everybody's a little different on that. And particularly now that I've got my Da Vinci with the Shield manufacturing roller delay buffer system that's really tunable to your ammo, I think that's what will eventually have me maybe cross down to a more snappy round. But but yeah, so I'd accumulate all these different bullets, and I wanted some 124 grain jacketed hollow point just from a, to be able to have a self defense round, or something in the, if the boogaloo happens, I've got some hollow points. So I found myself with, well, I've got a bunch of blue 125s, and then I've got Hoosier bullets in 124, which are both, well, yeah, Hoosier bullets in 124, Summit City in 124, and both of those are high tech coated. Blues obviously are their blue coating, and then I have the jacketed hollow point. And so as I was starting to load ammo, I was like, well, I got all these 124s. I'm going to shoot them some point in time. I wonder if one of them is intrinsically better than the other. And if so, maybe use those at matches and practice with the others or whatever, right? So I just wanted to gather some data, and certainly learning from the 160 about what I couldn't do, just because the case gauge rate was so high, for whatever reason. And so I didn't want to do the accuracy test. It's like, well, hey, I really want to get this test more well-rounded with more metrics of data. And so I just tried to think of as many as I could get, with about 75 or 80 rounds of each load. So I wasn't gonna, I don't know. Those are kind of my parameters. So I wanted to keep the same,
Okay.
I want to keep the same controls, same powder charge, same die settings, same press, same primers, same mixed brass batch, and just do all these 4 different bullets. And so I loaded them all up, and over the course of a few different days at the range over the last few weeks, I compiled a bunch of data.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, I know what you mean about the keyboard warrior type thing. But if nothing else, you're finding out what works best in your gun with those items set up that
That
way.
Yeah, I mean, that was my primary goal. And then when I learned that I might be able to share information with other people, and that they could, maybe they can make an improvement on one aspect of the test, or just like, if I can help somebody, I'm going to share the information. Even if it leaves me vulnerable to criticism, that's fine. I mean, heck, we wouldn't be building a relationship here if I hadn't put this information out there and you reached out and want to talk about it. So,
Yeah.
to me, making a new friend in the shooting community is a win, even if you can ultimately conclude, well, all the data is so similar, it's inconclusive. Well, if that's how someone wants to look at all of what I got, maybe it is. Maybe that tells everybody that already has a bunch of these different bullets at home that they're all good to go compared to the others. Great, stick with your manufacturer. Particularly if you're sponsored. Now you're not missing anything by some other manufacturer. So I like to help. That's why I share my recipes for food and share my data for bullet tests, I guess.
Right. So this looks like all of the data that you compiled between the different projectiles.
Correct. Yeah. So I posted a picture of both targets that I used.
Mm-hmm.
My core notebook, which ultimately I've kind of turned into 10 different metrics, 2 pages that give summaries of the metrics, and then sort of a scoring system, which is very rudimentary, and I don't think weighted at all well. But I'm like, well, let me at least, I don't know, let me do something to start, and move on from there. So yeah, this is all the data, which anybody can find on my Instagram. The handwriting might suck a little bit, and feel free to ask me a question if you can't read it. But I wanted to see, I think it's reasonable for a shooter to know what kind of bullet weight loss do you get when you pull a bullet at chrono, right? Like, I mean, particularly for people that dance around minor power factor or major power factor limit, you
Right.
don't you don't want
Yeah.
to you don't want to go in with a 125 and you find out it's a 124.5, and you're shooting right on the edge of velocity, or the atmospheric pressure of the day that you're shooting, or the temperature or the elevation all changes your ratio. Or like my friend Eric that I used to stay with, he was the only person that failed major power factor at area 8 last year. So he was the only open shooter that shot open minor on accident. And it
Yikes.
was because his chrono was reading higher than it should have been. So
Oh, wow.
there's a call to Caldwell, right? He thought he was coming in with 168, 169. Well, he ended up with 164.9. And so
Yikes.
it's like,
Oh,
so
damn.
so 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 there's variables, right? And he's not. I mean, he's not the kind of person that's trying to like be cheap with his components. He's like, all right, I've got a load. I tested it. It looked good. I show up. It's not good at this elevation on this day. And so anyway, I start out. I literally took bullet number one, loaded it through my press, no powder, just to be safe, and I isolated all this ammo, and I put a little one mark on the bottom of the brass. Bullet number two, 2 marks. Bullet number three, 3 marks. Next bullet type or manufacturer. So I end up with 12 bullets that are all marked very distinctly. I've weighed each one of those projectiles beforehand, and I weigh each one of them afterwards after I pull it with my inertia bullet puller. And I found that blues and the Precision Delta lost no weight at all. They came out as they came into the casing. The Summit City and the Hoosier, which both use high-tech coatings, had a small scratch off of that coating based on how it went in. And I had plenty of flare on the case too. Like I know I wasn't under flaring my casings, but those consistently across the board, every single one of those 3 projectiles for each lost 0.1 grain. So boom, we got a data point, right? So now that I know with all the velocities that I do later, that I know what my grain is, at least on my 3 sample size. Should it be more than 3? Well, yeah, the more data you get, the better. But it was a lot of work to load 12
Yeah.
rounds individually and pull 12 rounds and weigh them before and after. And I've got a picture of every single bullet before and after. I've got a picture or a video of every aspect of my data. And nobody wants to see all that. But I have it in case someone's like, did you really do that? Yes, I did. And I can show you. So, it was a lot of work documenting that. So we got bullet weight. Once I got bullet weight, I took, overall length of 6 different cases. Cause again, that's work. I'm writing down into the 10,000ths of an inch. And I decided to make that, not a who wins or loses in terms of like, this is the longest one, this is the shortest one, because all the bullets are slightly different. So, like that's not a
Mhm.
metric I can give a win or loss to. But I found it interesting that Summit Cities had the least amount of spread in terms of what the longest and the shortest was. And then Blues and Hoosiers had the same amount of spread, and that the Precision Delta had the widest amount of spread in terms of longest to shortest, just of the 6 that I grabbed. Is 6 too few? To somebody it is. To me, that's what I went with. And now I've got an idea of which bullets are loading a more consistent overall length. Because particularly with an open gun, where to quote a North Carolina friend of mine, custom guns come with custom problems, and so the the
For sure.
the more you can reduce variances in your customization, which obviously ammo is a big one. I was just curious. So all right. So now I've got what the average is and what the extreme spread is of that overall bullet length. And of course, we're talking 35 thousandths to 110 hundredths as the biggest to smallest gap. But all right, it's a metric, right? So I've got some data. That's all I'm trying to do is get data. I did take 10 bullets and weigh them of each one to get an average bullet weight of what's actually coming from the factory. So, Summit Cities, they say they're 124. Their gross weight was 124.4. So they came in overweight. Precision Delta came in at 124.6. So that came in overweight. Blues came in at 125.4 on average. That came in overweight. And Hoosier came in underweight at 123.8. And so, again, this is not a bad or not. I think if you're going to be reloading mass quantities of any one of these bullet manufacturers, you're probably going to weigh a lot of them and have an idea of what the pull weight is on average so that you can base a power factor around it, right? So again, no winners or losers there. I'm just gathering data. So that was another metric. Obviously, chrono. And do you have any questions? I'm just kind of running through everything. I don't want to talk over you.
Right. Well, now I'm looking at the sheet. I see where you have looks like 125.4 grains for blue,
Yep,
123.7 grain for green. I'm
correct.
not seeing anything. I'm not seeing where you wrote it down for red or the jacketed hollow point.
I didn't, and you're right. And that was
Okay.
because I realized well, actually, no, I didn't realize. So that's a good catch. Basically, if you flip back a page or to my first page that has piece of paper torn out in the corners, and in the middle there is where I've got what each of the bullets weigh. And then I use the subsequent data at the top of that page about bullet loss. And basically, the reason why you see 125.4 for blue, but 123.7 for green is because the green and red each lost 0.1 grain. And I just failed to notate that on the chrono page. But all the data is based off of the gross weight minus 0.1 grain for red and green, and then the actual gross weight for blue and precision delta. But that's a good catch in terms of documentation. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. So this is the page you're talking about here that I have on the screen now.
Correct. Yeah. So
Okay.
that middle section is the 10 of each average weight. The top
Right.
is where we know that green and red lose 0.1 grain. So I simply took the green and red average and knocked 0.1 grain off when I calculated power factor on the next page.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. That's a pretty strong power factor for all of them.
Yes. And what I didn't want to do is, well, first of all, I've never loaded CFE pistol before. All my open 9 major has been HS6. And when I was able to get my hands on some CFE pistol, I've read that it takes a lower charge weight at least to get the similar power factor, and it burns a little cleaner. So I want to play around with that powder as well. So I got my own little internal HS6 for CFE pistol data, because at 7 grains of HS6, at least out of my gun, that produces 171 power factor. You can see here that at 6.8, we're anywhere from 185.5 to 183.8, and
Yeah.
so less powder, significantly higher power factor. And so this is part of me even reverse engineering my own load for CFE pistol. But what I didn't want to do is come in kind of like the Summit City and the Blues. If there was going to be a bullet issue that was slowing it down significantly, I didn't want that to be an outlier in this test. So I want to make sure everything was going to be over major, and just there we are. There's my powder charge. So
right. So now
so
you have
yeah,
a starting. How did you come up with your? Did you find some reloading data to give you a starting point, or did you just swag it?
with CFE pistol or with
Yeah,
HS6.
CFE pistol.
So I've read reloading data on forums that people say, for my gun, I use 7 grains of
Okay.
HS6, 6.6 of CFE pistol. And so I knew that 6.6 and lower would probably still make power factor, but I was like, well, we're already rolling the dice with Sammy spec here anyway. I'm just going to knock it down to 6.8 from a 7. And then now I've got an observation about what that difference is, because I knew it would be more than 7 grains of HS6 in terms of power factor. And since I haven't changed the dial except to load 5.1 grain for the accuracy test, this is just my first data point. So yeah, I sort of winged it, but I sort of had some background knowledge, and I bumped it up just for the test's sake to make sure I didn't have something come in under major and that be a talking point.
Okay. So overall, how happy are you with the results of your test?
I'm pretty happy. I was also really happy. You know, I went on. So the reason why I didn't do an accuracy test with my Rock Island, I did it with the PCC, was twofold. One, even on the sandbag, I was using an 8 MOA dot through my CTS2 from Seymour is a pretty big dot at 17 yards in terms of like trying to have a specific point of hold. And you've got all the additional handgun, user error possibilities. And I thought that an accuracy test out of a handgun off a sandbag would probably not give me as accurate results as I wanted. So I did not do an accuracy test with the Rock Island for that reason. I figured accuracy for these bullets would be primarily determined by how the manufacturer makes them and their coating. I figured all things equal, with the same powder charge, with the same primer, with the same dye settings, that the internal pressures are going to be relatively close in the amount of SAMI spec we're talking. And so I figured this was more of a coating and a manufacturer's process test in terms of accuracy. So I didn't see a problem with lowering the powder charge down to shoot out of my PCC, because, knowing that I'm running 185 out of a handgun, I might be over 200 in my PCC at that, at that velocity. And so while I know DaVinci makes incredibly robust firearms, that was unnecessary stress to put on the components that, over time, the components wear down. Vibration and explosions break guns. So I did end up chronoing 5 rounds of each through my PCC towards the end, because I was like, you know what? I know it can take it. Let me just see what that feels like. And what was really interesting was all 4 rounds shot softer in the 9 major configuration than the 5.1 grain configuration.
That's weird.
Yeah, and I have to assume that's how I have my Shield roller delay buffer setup with the spring combination. It was softer, and that's an observation that I made. Now, does that mean I'm going to start running 9 major at my matches because it feels softer than the other 124s? No, because both of them didn't feel as soft as my 160, but it was distinguishably different. Particularly, I ran some 124 grain stand one armory through it as well, and that stuff was coming out of my PCC at near major power factor, which was really shocking for a 124 everyday manufacturer bullet. But yeah, no. Yeah. So anyway, receiver recoil wasn't interesting.
I think you had posted what it was like 150 power factor, was it not?
Geez, here's another example of where I didn't actually do the math and write it down.
Okay.
I mean, whatever 124 times 1356 is. I can get it. Let me see if I can get it. I can switch. I've got my calculator up. I'm going to just jump off screen real quick. So we got 1356 times an assumed 124, because we know jacketed bullets don't lose. Yeah, 168 power factor. So stand one out of my PCC was coming out at 168, which you think about, PCC shooters that don't load and, maybe appreciate ammo made in Texas and want to support stand one, which I do. Boy, you're rolling up to a match by the way, out of a 10.5 inch barrel, right? I'm shooting an SBR. So it's coming out at 168 out of an SBR. So, that's not a competitive advantage in most cases.
No, definitely not.
You'll probably never have a popper calibration, but
I'm trying. There's an app. There is an app. I'm trying to find it. I'll have to keep scrolling through here as we talk. But there is an actual app that allows you to just punch in. Man, why can I not find it? Son of a gun. Anyway, somewhere I have an app that allows you basically punch in the velocity, the grain of the bullet, and it will give you power factor.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's real quick. I'll have to try to flip through and figure out which one that one is. I don't think. No, that's not it. Well, shoot. I'll figure it out.
Yeah. So anyway, I chrono everything out of the Rock Island. Really, the most interesting data there, I felt, was the standard deviation of the velocities.
Okay.
Which again, the Summit City and the Hoosier are identical profiles, so they should have the exact same or near identical internal pressures. the Precision Delta was a longer, taller profile, and ironically seated lower because the overall length was the least of all of them, which you'd think would have higher pressures. And then the blues were kind of in the middle. Or I guess I'd have to confirm on my overall spread there. No, the blue. Well, anyway, shooting 15 rounds through a chrono, I think, is enough to have a standard deviation that's worth looking at in terms of velocities of the bullet coating and the bullet manufacturer's process, right? So again, we don't know what the internal pressure is of each one of those, but we know that each 15 that I shot were the same. And so I don't care that one of them made more power factor than the other. I don't care that one of them had a higher velocity than the other, because all that is internal pressures that we're talking about. I do care that the velocity difference had, different standard deviations. And so I thought that was one of the most interesting data points. Precision Delta had the lowest standard deviation of 7.98, and then Summit City
Yeah.
at 13.39. And then basically it was a tie, but I ranked them technically, the Hoosier were 16.06 and then 16.08 with the Blues. And really the reason why I say it's a tie is it's a 21.27 feet per second versus a 20.29, which is a pretty nominal feet per second in terms of, less than 1 feet per second difference is the variation there. But the fact that it was 20 versus say 10 or 17 basically out of the reds, I thought that was an interesting metric worth looking at. And then of course accuracy was the other one. And since I know we're running low on time, let's go ahead and skip to that. All four bullet types had 3 outliers, which I think is an interesting data point. There's a core group or a core shape of each one of these targets, and then there's 3 bullets off to the side. And so that's either me pulling 1 out of 4 bullets because I shot 12 for the accuracy test, or I don't know. But it's an interesting data point is you've got these 3 outliers of each one of the tests, and of each one of these groups, they're all within a 3-inch circle, basically. Now,
At
the core
17
group
yards.
at 17 yards, every one of these
Okay.
were within a 3-inch group, which because most of the well, they're all a little different, but I mean, basically, you're going to hit the head alpha on every one of these if your dot's in the middle, including a perf break on either side. So, um, basically, they were all within a 3-inch group. And then there's the core, which you're showing the Blues right now. The Blues had the tightest core in terms of that grouping.
Right.
The rest of them were still all within a 1.5-inch circle. So, if from an accuracy standpoint, can you rank these? I think you can. I think Blues had the tightest core circle. Ironically, they had the worst widespread, but again, I'm still on the gun. As you know, keeping the gun's axis true north is a lot easier with a reticle than with a red dot.
Sure.
And so,
Absolutely.
is this me pushing them all over a little bit because that's how I'm on the gun? Probably. The rest of the groups are all touching making 1 hole. So, they're all accurate bullets. But you can still rank them if you want to. And what else? Yeah, I mean, I think accuracy and standard deviation were kind of the 2 biggest takeaways from the test, but overall, like, everything did really well. And so that's an interesting data point too. If you want to pick winners and losers, you'd have to take all 10 of my metrics, rank the metrics in importance, assign a
Right.
higher point scale to the most important, and vice versa, and then come up with a winner and loser. And I still might do that, but I think the ultimate point here was all 3 of the coated bullets did really well, but just know you're going to lose a little bit of weight on high-tech coated bullets, and you don't with blue, at least in my testing parameters. And
But
the at the
but But Mike, does 1/10 of a grain really matter?
It shouldn't. Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't. But now keep in mind, at 1,300, 1,400 feet per second, that can be something that hurts in average, particularly if you're cranking out rounds really fast and your powder
Mm-hmm.
charge is shaking around a little bit. Now you've got a variance in your powder and a variance in the bullet, and you're just assuming there's no variances in your powder while you load, right? Because I know I've been
Yeah.
to chrono and had like a whoa, that one certainly had some stuff shaken out of it while I was making it.
So, but now my question is, when you load yours, how much of a buffer? Like when we were loading, we would load
Mhm.
ours for minor power factor to be between 130 and 132.
Okay.
So we
Yeah.
were ensuring that regardless of where we went or whatever else, we had enough of a buffer there that it doesn't matter.
Right. Absolutely. For PCC, uh, mine, like based on my chrono and then based on what I've seen at certain matches chronos, I load mine so they should end up at the match between 128 and 131. Now for
Okay, so
for
you're
for
going a
area
little
match,
lower.
I'm a little lower, but for area matches, I put an extra zero point 0.2 grain in my case so that I'm a lot higher. Um, I'm coming in at 135 at area 6 or area 8 because
Wow.
that's
Okay.
that's that's the stage where I cannot afford to have, two low charges and then have to fight my average up just for whatever reason.
I'm listening.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so, oh, and then the biggest takeaway was all the coated bullets work really well at this overall length, both in my PCC and my handgun, but the jacketed hollow points need to be longer because at the length that they were loaded,
Mm-hmm.
while I was chronoing my 15 rounds, it took me 21 rounds to get 15 because I had failure to feeds by the bullet getting stuck in the feed ramp because it
Okay.
just the geometry of my mags and my feed ramp. All 6 rounds that I had to stop and take out had significant setback into the case.
Now, I know you're. How much of that, though, do you think has to do with the shape of the bullet in addition to the length?
I don't know. I know that I started loading open major with the 125 grain profile from Blues because David Wampler says the profile is far more friendly for the whole feed ramp, top of the chamber, into the chamber geometry than jacketed hollow points are. And so it very well can be the shape of the bullet, maybe even combined with the bullet material against my feed ramp. But I know that most people are like, well, jagged hollow points are more accurate um, because they're loaded from the front to the rear. But apparently they have to be loaded longer to feed at least in my handgun. That's just a data point. I know there's plenty of people that rock 38 super and 9 major in nice long beautiful jacketed hollow points. And for my die settings, uh, as at least the base combination of all the other factors, it was just too short for them to feed reliably. So I stopped shooting them out of the handgun once I got my chrono, just because I was sick of having them nosedive and becoming dangerous. They fed fine for
Okay.
my PCC, no issues there. They shot super soft, like
Hmm.
I said.
Well, I mean, and by far they had the best standard deviation
Yes,
of all of it. I don't know
they
how
had they
much
had
of
the
that
best
was. Yeah.
they had the best standard deviation in their velocity. They had the most consistent bullet weight of all the ones that I were weighing. Um, and I think, let's see, they also had the most generous buffer from the advertised weight to the actual average weight. So they're great bullets, they're great projectiles. Just this particular load wasn't a great fit for my handgun.
Right. Yeah, and even when you pulled them, there was no loss of weight.
Yep,
But
no loss.
I assume that's just because they're a jacketed bullet, so there's no coating that's coming off.
I don't think there's any way there's going to be weight coming off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not unless I
Okay.
was using steel cases that were cutting into the jacket, but I'm not.
Right. Interesting. It looks like you were loading them at. Now, what did you have your press set for? Because it looks like they basically all came out or pretty close to 0.95.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know how to answer your question besides I had them set up for 1.1 overall length for in my 160 profile.
Okay, gotcha. That's what. Well, that
So
answered my question.
yeah. Yeah.
So, all right, that's not that bad.
No, I mean, I didn't want to adjust my dies to do this test because I knew my blues were good to go as is. And so I wanted to see if I introduce other bullet manufacturers on my settings for my gun, were they going to jive or not? And it just turned out that, for whatever reason, the combination of this overall length with my feed ramp, the jacket hollow points didn't work this short. And it's not a surprise. They came out on average on 1.07. That's pretty short.
Yeah, and actually, I was looking at the Hoosier data and not the other. Yeah, it did come out pretty short actually at 1.0753. So yeah, I could see where bumping it up to the 1.1, like you're saying, might make a big difference in how it feeds.
Oh, absolutely.
That
But,
thing's just going
again,
head on into the bottom of the feed ramp.
it's 100%. Yeah, yeah. So again, that's not a knock against the bullet type or manufacturer. That's just
Yep.
how my setup is right now. It needs to be adjusted. And, like my full-time job isn't reviewing bullet manufacturers, right? This is a
Right.
complete almost reallocation of my hobby time to do something, to just put information out there. So, should I have had the same overall length for every bullet? Okay, that's going to at least answer feeding reliability questions, but it's going to change the internal pressures, which, now that changes velocity, accuracy. I mean, so
Right.
what's the perfect test? I don't know, but I wanted to get a lot of data. And now this is not per se, and if anybody's watched the podcast this long, good for you. And that's not
There's
a
only a
knock on
few
you.
of
It's
them.
just, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
But
drier information, but it's good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So people are going to eat this up that eat it up. But as an observation of all the metrics that I took, every bullet manufacturer finished fourth in one category, except Summit City. The lowest they ever fit, in fact, it's where a lot of the time they landed, was third. So they never were last in something. They never had the worst standard velocity or the worst gross accuracy or core accuracy or uh, average spread of the bullet loading. So, is that the winner? No, but it's an interesting point of data. They,
Sure.
maybe for my setup and all this stuff, that's the most consistent. But
For your
but
gun.
that's again,
Absolutely.
that's equal weighting everything, and that's where that point falls apart. But
Right. And this is not an infomercial for Summit City, so.
nope, no, it's not. They'd like it to be. Every time I put something out,
Oh,
he's like,
sure.
"Oh, what'd you get on this?" I'm like, Tony, like, I love your stuff. You're my 160 guy. You know, I have too many blues to make you my 124 guy right now, at least. So
Right. Yeah, you don't want to just discard them. I get you. Very interesting. I mean, there's always something you can glean from this type of information,
yeah, I mean, this certainly is going to make me a better reloader, because I've learned things about certain aspects that I can now tweak, move, troubleshoot while I'm practicing or developing a load. So, hopefully this gives people data, that they can do the same thing and become a better reloader.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think it's probably hard to go through this information the way you have it written on the page. Like,
Yeah.
what all of it is. And I was able to pick out some of it, but some of it I wasn't until we started talking. I'm like, oh, okay. Now I'm tracking and following along.
Well, it sounds like I need to have a series of follow-up posts with more clearly written and resulted information for the greater good.
Yeah. I mean, let me see if I can. I don't know where it's going to pop up. I've got 3 screens, so it can pop up anywhere.
All right.
All right. So I will maximize that. Hopefully I don't. All right. I'm going to have to make that smaller. Now I can resize this. And then you can, but this is what I'm saying. This is where, like you, I mean, this is basically a hobby. So it makes it much more difficult. There we go. This is just one I just did. This is a quick one. I've done others, which are much more intense than this, but this was July of 2020. And I just did 5 strings of 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. Something obviously happened there, so I just blacked it out. I don't remember what that was, but the average velocity, standard deviation, and then what the average was overall, what the average power factor was, and then. But I mean, to take what you have, all those pages, and try to condense it down into something more palatable is going to take you quite a bit of time. So
yeah, I mean, maybe not. I mean, I know the data in and out. I know how to summarize it. I mean, I have, two of the pictures in there are the summary of all the results and just where, 1, 2, 3, 4. Same with this one here. That's a terrible way to hold it up.
Right.
So that has where people, that has where everybody ranked. The problem is, I put 10 pages on my post, and those are probably the most 2 important. And you got to lead with a target, because if I post a picture of a yellow legal pad, nobody's going to want to scroll past it and see what's on there. But right. Yeah, I mean, I do kind of have the summaries with the results, but I could still do it in a more effective way.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this thing a little bit better readable. I'm trying to figure out which ones. Oh, that's tiny. I don't know. Oh, I know why. No, interesting. I don't know why it's making it small. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of data. There we are, back to the short-barreled rifles again.
Full circle.
So I don't know where the app went on my phone. I updated to a new phone, and I can't find it on my phone anywhere. So, but there is one called Bullet Energy Calculator. I just downloaded it, and when you open it up, it asks the same thing. So weight in grains, we'll say 124. And then velocity in feet per second, you said what, 1350?
Let's see. Do 1294.
1294. So I pop in 1294.
Oh yeah. You're talking about the stand one. Yeah, 1356 would have been that one.
Okay, 1356 gives you a power factor of 168.144, and that's all I had to punch in.
Yep.
So if anybody is still listening, there you go. There's a bonus. It's an app.
Yeah.
I use an Android, so it's Bullet Energy Calculator. I don't know what happened to the other app. It's literally not on my phone, so I don't know if it just disappeared or what.
Yeah.
But so a lot of information. Do you have any plans in the future to do any more testing?
I don't have any plans. I probably will.
Okay.
Yeah. I
mean,
mean,
anything else? I feel like doing this.
Yeah, for example, my team Da Vinci, their PCC is so amazing. And as soon as I was brought onto the team, the owner David was like, hey, are you going to do you want to SBR like you normally shoot with everything else? I'm like, heck yeah. He's like, here's the serial number for your lower. So I was able to start my tax process before I even had it actually transferred to me. And that so I'm still waiting on that. Hopefully that'll come back around the first week in November based on current ATF times. But for now, I've got my primary and my backup PCC. I've got my Da Vinci upper and trigger and buffer system in what was my primary PCC. So I'll eventually have 3 short barrel rifle PCCs with 3 different buffer systems: the Shield roller delay, the MBX air buffer, and the Blitzkrieg hydraulic. And so so I guess I do have plans. I've been thinking about this. Once I have all three PCCs set up, I'm going to run the same ammo through the different buffer systems
Ooh.
and see if I can, does the buffer affect accuracy? How much
Mm,
pressure is there before? I don't know. So,
right.
perceived recoil, see if, just, the different triggers, are there lower splits with one hyperfire versus the other? Who knows? So I probably will do some more testing, because I know particularly the buffer system is probably what PCC shooters focus on the most. Because you can have a great slow burning powder or great load, and if you're just using a standard A2 buffer, it's going to feel violent. And then you get into the hydraulic, and then you can tune the air buffer and the roller delay, and they all feel different. So
Right.
because I built 3 PCCs and I went from the hydraulic to trying the air buffer to now my gun came with a roller delay. I wanted to try it, but it's $300. That's an expensive test.
Yeah.
Everybody that shot it loves it. So, like, if you're still listening, but I'd much rather be able to tell people, and throw in, a 7-ounce buffer that, wouldn't cycle on a 5.56 because it's too long, but throw in a heavy buffer and then a regular A2. I've got 5 buffer systems I can test now. I think that'd be valuable information as people maybe want to either play in PCC, or it's an easy division to get started in, because if you're already 5.56 carbine, Marine, if that's your jam already, you're going to become a PCC shooter pretty quick. So, it'd be great to have unbiased information out there with tests that people can go through and look at and say, here's how I want to spend my first buffer allocation.
Right. Yeah, for sure. That sounds like a pretty cool test, actually. I think the only problem you'd have is the perceived recoil would be more subjective than objective. But I feel like
Yeah.
everything else, though, you can't measure internal chamber pressure, but at least you could measure your accuracy, your velocity, and all of that. So that'd be an interesting one to see as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to come up with some sort of scale that measures, recoil for perceived recoil. I mean, yeah, it's certainly subjective, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess the proof would be in, say, a
The
10
pudding.
yard bill drill. Yeah, proof's in the pudding. But like a 10-yard bill drill, even if the perceived recoil is higher, but your group is tighter, that tells you that the buffer is doing its job, right? I mean, I think there would be ways to at least measure them and extrapolate data.
You know who I would reach out to?
Ooh,
I would reach out to Nemo Arms, Nemo Arms.
okay.
They have a buffer system in their rifles. It's like a two-stage buffer system
Hmm.
that reduces their recoil down to crazy amount of nothing. Like a 308 recoils like a 5.56.
Wow.
It's crazy stupid how much, but they might know of a way that you might be able to. Maybe there's a pad that goes under the recoil pad at the end of the stock. Maybe they can
Mhm.
measure. I don't know, and I'm not saying spend a
Yeah,
lot of money either, but they
yeah,
may have
yeah.
a way that this is how we did it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So, well, Mike, thanks for coming on. I know you've got to run, so I don't want to hold you any longer. But we definitely
Thanks for
need
having me, Dave.
to. Oh man, it's been a pleasure. But we definitely need to talk more numbers because I could talk numbers for days.
Yeah, heck yeah, man. Whenever you want.
All right, cool.
Well, thanks again for having me, and we'll catch you around.
Absolutely.